Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. If you still can't hear me, please let me know, or please let me know if you can hear me. Today's webinar is part of our new faculty orientation series, but given that the content is really relevant to everyone working in extension, we've invited everyone with an extension appointment to attend. So thank you to those who have joined us. Our topic today, again, is Civil Rights and Compliance, and my name is Shannon Harillo. I'm the Associate Director of Extension, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. In terms of logistics, I'll keep everyone muted just to minimize background noise. The presenter will take questions after each section, and Paul will show you those sections so you can know when you can ask questions. But if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat pod as we're going, and then Paul will take them when he pauses for questions. Or at that time, you can unmute yourself. If you're on the phone, just a reminder to press *6 to unmute and *6 to mute yourself again. Others may unmute themselves on the computer. The recording will be posted on the Employee Resources webinar page, and our webinars for the entire series will be posted there and made accessible. And following that, I'll send out an email to all of our staff and our faculty, letting them know where they can find those webinars. After the webinar, we do have a short survey that we will post in the chat pod, and I hope that everyone will go there before exiting the interview. Your feedback will definitely help us improve this webinar as well as others. So next, let me introduce our presenter. We have Paul Lessick, the Civil Rights and Compliance Coordinator. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Shannon. Hope everyone can hear me. As Shannon mentioned, we'll be going through some information. Let me give you some of the topics. Okay, I'm passing, there we go. There we go. Here's our agenda. We're going to have a civil rights overview. We'll look at EEO statements. We'll talk about the And Justice for All poster. We'll talk about parity. We'll talk about the regs, which is race, ethnicity, and gender, and data collection, and then we'll talk about the fingerprinting. So when I get to the end of each section, go ahead and chat, use a chat box for any questions. Hopefully it's pretty comprehensive, where if you have a question at the start of the presentation, I will cover it in the slides. So as a quick introduction, my name is Paul Lessick. I've been with Extension going on 12 years now. I cover civil rights for Extension, College of Agriculture, and the experiment stations. And I work with conjunction with the Civil Rights Office, Equal Opportunity and Title IX office on campus. I think a lot of people are a little confused by that. But the Title IX office, they conduct investigations, they're fair and impartial, and they cover any kind of allegations of discrimination. They also work with prevention and compliance. That's why the sexual harassment training we all get comes from this office. And they have a lot of other resources. So if you know an employee or a student that needs accommodation or has an issue or a concern, you would contact the Title IX office on campus. However, if you have a program participant that has some concerns about accessibility or needs accommodation, that would be me. And at the end of this presentation, I will give you my contact information. So let's start with our first slide. Here's the Equal Opportunity Office, and I have the Equal Opportunity Statement for the university for your reference as well. So, okay, first slide, I would like to reiterate that we are a recipient of federal funding. So as an entity that gets federal funding, we are open without regard to race, color, national origin, gender identity, religion, age, height, weight, disability, political beliefs, sexual orientation, marital status, family status, or veteran status. So our programs at all times are open to everyone. And with federal funding comes great responsibility. Because we receive funds from the government, we are held up to a very high standard to ensure that every effort is made to reach all segments of the community. We fall under Title IX, as I mentioned before in my presentation, the Title IX office on campus. Title IX specifically covers civil rights for educational program or any educational activity that receives federal assistance. So we are legally obligated to document our efforts related to teaching, employment, recruitment, and any populations involved in programming. And we'll go through this in depth in my conversation in this presentation. So we fall under the USDA and NEPA, which is Department of Agriculture and National Institute of Food and Agriculture. So what is a civil rights audit? Because we receive funding, USDA could at any time notify us for an audit, or they call it an official visit, but it's kind of like an audit. And it's a regular systematic inspection that the USDA makes to determine if we are following all rules and regulations. So it includes extension programming, it could include interviewing people, hiring people, folks that get promoted, folks that get transferred. They look at everything. And as an extension employee, you can be involved in an audit. They might ask you questions. It might be a phone interview. It might be face-to-face. We've had an audit 3 or 4 years ago, and they look at everything. So part of this presentation is to let you be aware of some of the requirements we all have as extension employees and university employees. So civil rights is really, it's a part of everything we do. It's administration, it's programming, it's how we advertise, how we design flyers. We serve on a search committee. When you plan research activities, how we design lesson plans, it's part of all of our jobs. So as employees, we all have civil rights responsibilities. So how do we participate in civil rights in our work? There's lots of things we do, how we reach people. We'll talk next about Injustice for All poster that should be displayed in your teaching. We also must capture the regs, which is the race, ethnicity, and gender of program participants. And in the light blue portion of the slide, you'll see all staff members are expected to be knowledgeable and skilled in implementing equal opportunities for extension programs. So let's talk a little bit about the Injustice for All poster. This poster must be displayed. I have one here in my office. This is what it looks like. This is a nice laminated copy, but this emphasizes our programs are open to everyone and we don't exclude anyone. There's also information that we receive federal funding, and there's a complaint process. It's in English and Spanish, and it's required that you have this poster at least at the start of every class. If you have new people join your class, you have to explain this. Ideally, it will be placed in a position where you teach, where you can just refer to it. A lot of folks teach in the field, and in that case, you carry it with you. And I think you should carry it with all your materials, and it should be part of your introduction to the class, introduction to yourself, what the class is about, and the Civil Rights and Justice for All poster. It has to be 11 by 17. It can't be on a PowerPoint slide like I have it here. It can't be on a business card. It has to be in color. Again, these are not my rules. This is the USDA requires this. Very easy to get. I have a link on the slide. I can send you the link later. It's very easy. You type in and Justice for All poster, it comes up all over Google. So it's very easy to get. The tricky part is 11 by 17. I know this is larger than a regular piece of paper, but we are required to carry this in all the classes you teach. The one on the left, the blue poster you're seeing, that is the newest update. The one on the left is the Statue of Liberty, which I believe is the older one. Either one is fine. The blue is for SNAP funding programs. The green is for everyone else. So any questions about the posters? Let's see if I have any questions here. Okay, here we go. So I'll talk a little bit about parody and program, and not parody. I think it's funny. I mentioned this and someone thought I meant like Saturday Night Live, which I'd love to talk about Eddie Murphy and Steve Martin right now, but for now we're talking about parody and programs. So what is parody? Parody is the quality or state of being equal, an even ratio or an equivalence between groups. So in terms of outreach and teaching, we need to reach parity between the diverse populations for the folks that make up our community and who we actually reach out to and teach. That's the kind of ratio balance we're trying to reach. So we must continually strive to become aware of who is in our community, where they are located, who they are, and how we include them when we design, promote, and implement our programs. Forgive me, folks, my computer is a little slow and I'm hitting between. I don't want to hit it too much. We might go to the next slide, so just forgive me a second. The slides are not pushing forward. Here we go. Here we go. So how is parity applied to programming? Look at the middle paragraph. It's a mouthful. Let me read it to you. So parity is when the community members reach through our programs are considered to be in parity when the percentage of each racial and ethnic group is at least 80% or more of the total population of a particular group within the general population. And that's a mouthful. And I try to make this paragraph a little simpler, but that's what it is. If you think of a percentage within a percentage, and I think this next slide will make this a little more clear. So let's look at this graph. We have 100,000 people in Clark County, and this is just an example. The gray is what the population is made up of, and the yellow is the goal of who you're trying to reach. So let's look at the first column. This is Caucasian folks in Clark County. And let's say, for example, the gray line constitutes 62,000 people. So 62,000 people in this particular zip code in Clark County is Caucasian. If you reach 62,000, you would be 100% parity, which is almost impossible, but that's, could be a goal. We're looking for 80%. So a percentage within a percentage. So in this example, let's say 62,000 people were right. If we reached 49,600, that would put us in parity. Now you would never maybe reach 100,000 people. So we're going to break it down into smaller groups, but I just wanted everyone to see the idea between 100% parity and 80% parity, who we're attempting to reach in a program. So let me show you another slide. Parity is reached when the percentage of the actual group is reached within 80% of the potential. So again, think of a percentage within a percentage. So example 1,000 people participate in a program, and we know 72% of the population at large in this group is Caucasian. Therefore, out of 1,000 people, if you reach 720 Caucasian people, that would put you in parity. Now we're basing this, and this is a general overview. I know everybody's program is different counties in the state, different zip codes in the state. This is just a general overview, and we're looking at census information. So some programs look at school district figures or low-income students within Clark County School District. These are going to change our parity, and I realize that. This is just a broad overview on the concept of parity and who is in your community and who you are actually reaching. And we'll take another example. Say 1,000 people you reach, and 17% of this population is Hispanic or Latino. Therefore, 136, if you reach 136 Latinos in this population, then you reach parity, you reach 80%. Another example, here is a slide of the pie chart. On the left is potential, and the right is the actual people that you reached. And we'll talk about how you document that in just a minute. But this is just a broad overview of parity. So in this example, let's say this slide is who's out there, this group who attended your class or your program. So if you take 6,000 Caucasian folks out of 7,200 possibility, you're in parity. You take this number, divide it into this number, and that will give you percent. Let's say there's 1,500 African Americans in your community, 300 showed up to your class. You did not reach parity. That's only 20% of the potential you reached, and that's kind of a red flag. So you're aware of who is attending your program versus who is out there. In actuality, if you reached 1,200 people, 1,200 African Americans, that would put you in parity. Let's look at the Latino population in this example. 900 Latinos, theoretically, according to census information, is in this community. 700 attended. You're close. 78% in parity. Again, we're reaching for 80, and this is very close. And Asian population, again, 400 possibility of members in the community, and 150 attended. You're out of parity. This is just an idea, a general idea of thinking about who is in your community and who you're actually reaching. So how do you reach parity? And that's a good question, and that's something I could help you with. Just being aware of the demographics and the programs and who you're reaching out to, how you advertise, newspaper, community centers, hire staff and faculty that are representative of the communities we are trying to reach, utilizing local urban chambers, grassroots efforts, partnering with other communities, partners within the community, conducting needs assessment, consider language, culture, interest of everyone in the community, and utilizing appropriate social media as a way to spread the word. And we have to document, which is coming up next. So parity is an ongoing effort, and it never really is solved or done. So I hope people don't think we need to reach Latino population. I have a flyer, I'll put it in Spanish, file it, and it's done. It's always evolving because our community is always evolving. So people who change is always going to change, and people who move here, people who are trying to reach, is an ongoing process. So before I get into specific groups, I'll take a few minutes and see if we have any questions. So forgive me while I try to hover up here. So here's a question. This parity issue assumes that all racial and ethnic groups have the same interest level and needs across the board. So let me think about this question. True, but how do you know what the interest is in a group? Let's say you have a health and nutrition class and has a very low Latino interest. How is the class created? How is it designed? How is it advertised? There might be a group of Latinos that are interested in your class, and maybe they're not getting the word, they're not hearing about it, they're not, the advertising efforts and flyers maybe are not reaching this particular group, and that's something we could look at. And maybe it's something that's never going to be resolved. Maybe it's something that we could look at different ways to educate the public on these classes. So it's kind of up, again, these are real broad overviews and not necessarily a one-word answer or one-shot answer. So does parity apply to employment and or hiring practices? Is there a concerted effort to ensure that there's diverse advertising to address a broad range of community needs? That's a very good question. And yes, absolutely. That's why there's always a search committee with different folks in the search committee, how it's advertised. We have the equal opportunity statement in recruitment advertising. When we advertise for faculty positions, we always make sure there are different minority populations. It's a requirement to have different minority populations when we advertise positions. So that's a very good question. And yes, absolutely, we do that. Okay, is the audit by zip code? Thank you, Carol. It is by zip code. I think when the feds come in and they do an audit, they look at where the office is located, the makeup of the immediate community, how they're being reached, are they being reached? So they look at everything, Carol. I mean, I'm sure there are parts of Logandale that are much different from different zip codes in Clark County, say Las Vegas or Summerlin. There's just different populations, and it's a very comprehensive view when they do an audit. So they look at everything. We got dinged last time. Yes, Carol, we can talk about that. So any more questions about parity and the populations out there and who we reach?
Paul, there are some questions above Carol's question regarding the audit around the poster.
Okay, how do I get, oh, I didn't go up high enough, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Shannon?
So there are some more questions. How do I get a hold of the green laminated poster?
Yes, okay, all right, here we go. I'll go all the way up, there's a lot of questions here. So how can I get a blue one? The posters are available, there's a link, and I'm saying information. If you Google and Justice for All posters on Google, it all comes up. It's very easy to find, but I will send links, and it's on the slide presentation. I had a link. I will send that to everyone. Do we have to provide the relevance to the poster content in class at some point? I think if you show the poster to everyone, let them know we're federally funded, explain the poster, explain the complaint process, anyone has a concern, and this poster just kind of emphasize that the classes are open to everybody and we don't exclude anyone. I think that's the point of the poster. It's very brief and you can have it, people can come up and look at it, you can post it on the wall, you can place it on the table. Just make sure everybody's aware of the poster and they can read it themselves. And of course, call me with any questions you have about the poster. So I have another question. What about ensuring employees are representative of the communities and the populations of agency services? When we recruit, we never just have a position and someone applies and someone decides they get the job. It's always a committee. The questions are asked the same of every individual. The questions are approved by campus. There's a lot of steps in applying for a job with extension. So it's not just one person deciding, there's always a group effort, a group consensus. There's a basis of the position and the requirements of the job. I mean, there's a lot of levels when we hire someone. It's not just a one-shot deal. So that was a good question, Marguerite. I hope I answered it, but you and I served on some search committees together. I'd be happy to answer more questions if you have any.
And Paul, looks like there was one other question. Are they required for county-funded programs? And I assume this is in regard to the posters.
Yes, even partial funding, federal funding, and we are federally funding as an agency. So if it's a county-funded position, the answer is yes, just show the poster. It really does not take long, and it's really should be part of your introduction of the class and who you are and extension and university. The poster should just be a general part of it as well. Okay, another question. These are great principles to live by, but how does institutions stack up to those principles it purportedly supports? Well, we have this, as I mentioned, we have the Title IX office on campus that takes complaints. And when we're audited, we had this presentation is part of it, Juan Carlos. Everyone's aware of the community, who we reach, how we're funded, and how our programs are open to everyone. Okay. I think that's it for questions. We can go on now to race, ethnicity, and gender, and how this information is collected. So here we go. The reason why I want to show this slide is because the type in light blue actually comes from the USDA Civil Rights Compliance and Review Guide. And they all kind of say the same thing. We need a system to establish and maintain a system for collecting and reporting data. We need a data system that obtains racial, ethnic, and gender data. Aspects of program participation. We need to determine whether any racial, ethnic, or gender groups percentage are actually less than who we're reaching and what's out there. And we need to determine every major extension subject matter to the total population. Sorry, my screen's being cut off. To the total number of participants by race, ethnicity, and gender. These kind of say the same thing in a lot of different ways, but we are required to document who we reach, who participates versus who is out there in the community. This is part of all of our jobs, and if we're audited, they look at all this information that we're required to follow. So let's talk a little bit about race, ethnicity, and gender. Again, we have a lot of programs, and each program is very unique. And we all have specific nuances about our program, what it's about, and who we're trying to reach. So this is just a general discussion. But for now, the definition of race is there's two ethnicities, which is Hispanic and non-Hispanic, and there are 5 races. So white, black, American Indian, or Native Alaskan, Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander. And I put kind of numbers on there so you can see which 5 I'm talking about. And gender is designated for now into 2 categories, male and female. So I say for now, because there's a lot of legislation, sometimes it gets political, and there's a lot of opinions about this. And you might have an opinion about it, I have an opinion about it, but these 2 ethnicities, 2 genders, and 5 races is what the federal government requires us to document, capture, and keep track of who we're reaching out to. So an individual from Pakistan would fall under the Asian category, while an individual from Turkey would be placed in the white category. While you or the participant may agree or disagree with the federal definitions of race, we are required to use these categories and record participants in the above listed categories. Theoretically, there could be 6 ethnicities and 4 genders and 15 race categories. There could be, but for now, the feds just require the 2, 2, and 5. That's what we need to keep track of. So here they are broken down. I use the example of a Pakistani individual or someone from Turkey. This is all broken down here on what is considered African American, what is considered Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islanders, what is considered white. And the ethnicity and race, this is how it's broken down. So I'm going to stop here because it looks like I have some questions here. This is kind of a complicated topic. Can a person pick one category? Yes, and we'll get to that in a minute. So let me get through all the content about race and documentation. So I think if you have questions about what if someone doesn't want to pick it or someone doesn't want to disclose, we'll cover that. Okay. How can we find this information? About the definition of race that's on government websites and or part of the USDA, it's probably on their website. We are not allowed to assume, so how is this collected? Again, we're going to get there. So let me just get through the next 10 slides. We're going to cover a lot of this topic and how to collect it. Okay. Okay, what if I want to add a category or add something like not disclosed? The government doesn't offer, or the USDA, I should say, doesn't offer options such as non-disclose or someone unwilling to participate. Just like they don't offer a Filipino category, they don't offer a Middle Eastern category, or transgender, or other gender non-conforming categories are not offered. Just because it's not required, as a program manager or a program professional, you could add supplemental categories to your data you collect if you feel it's important to your program. So, for example, a program trying to reach the Filipino community, you could add a Filipino category if you'd like. However, never change what a participant has disclosed. So if you feel it's incorrect or you feel they made a mistake, simply explain all the race categories, and when a participant marks the box, you don't touch it. That's fair enough. Okay, so you can give people the option of opting out, and you can change. I'm going to be sure I didn't, okay, miss a slide. Or you could change categories to the reg information you collect. Well, yes and no. I mean, by all means, we want programs to feel comfortable and feel like the program is, we don't want to make people feel like they're forcing them into a category. This doesn't represent who I am. But it's very important to explain to the participants, there's 2 genders, 5 races, and 2 ethnicities. This is what the government requires us to report. So you're looking at the guidelines, you have folks make the best assumption for who they are. So end of the day, we can cater and change the rates for a program, but when we report it, we have to report it using those categories. Again, I think it's really important to remember 2, 2, 5, 2 genders, 2 ethnicities, 5 races. I mean, in a perfect world, we could have 16 race categories and 10 ethnicities and 5 genders, but the government for now isn't requiring that. And we have to follow what the government requires. So I can cater the rate sheet for my program, but I don't report what's collected. That's a little confusing, where you could change the rate sheet for your program, but you report something different. So here's an example. You reach out to 136 audience members, including 37 Filipino individuals, because you have a program that's catered to Filipinos. So 136 audience members. 12 are Hispanic, 12 are African American, 49 white, 15 Asian, 8 American Indian, 3 Pacific Islanders, and you have the 37 Filipinos who included as well. When you report this when you report your figures to the USDA, you would lump the Filipinos in the Asian category. Because remember, I had all the slides of all the different ethnicity breakdown. That's how you would report it. So it's the same 136 people. You would just collect the data for your program, but report it differently according to the Fed requirements. So does that make sense? Let me see if any more questions on that. Okay, no questions so far. Good. This is kind of tricky stuff, so I appreciate everyone bearing with me. Just looking at all these slides and kind of keep an open mind and think about your program, how it might be different from another program. Okay, that kind of makes sense, I guess. Oh, here's a question. Okay. How can we find this information? Thank you. What happens if they identify as white and African American? And Elsie, we will get there in just a minute. Just give me a little minute. So that makes sense, but how about the non-disclosures? And that's where it kind of gets a little gray. So let's say you have 136 folks in your program, 4 do not disclose. So 30 Hispanic, 21 African Americans, 65 white, 11 Asian, 2 American Indian, 3 Pacific Islanders, and 4 do not disclose. Again, when we report this information to the USDA, they don't have a non-disclosure category. So they're not going to ask you, tell us about who you reached, who was in your program, who you taught, and tell us the folks who didn't want to participate and didn't want to give that information. They don't ask that. So that's something that you need to think about your program and how you want to communicate that to your participants. I have a question. How about people of mixed race? Some identify, others. Yeah, Marguerite, we're going to talk about it in a minute. And people can check 1 or 2 categories. They can check any box they feel comfortable checking. And we're going to get there. So no questions so far about non-disclosure. Let's go to the next slide. So some people might not think it's fair. So, okay, I reached 136 folks and I had to report 132 because the 4 folks that didn't want to disclose, they kind of don't count. That's true. I mean, I think if you reach 136 people, you should disclose 136 people. And there is no non-disclosure. You have to make up your sheets what you feel comfortable with. If people don't disclose, you can keep that in a separate category, maybe a separate spreadsheet, and kind of keep track of all the folks that don't disclose. So what can I do to make sure people disclose? I think a lot of it is explaining to the audience, these are the categories the feds give us to report. This is the green poster that we don't discriminate. We strive to reach all populations at all the time. And I think if you really explain to the folks in your group, without forcing them, of course, but let them know the importance of getting this information so we know who we're reaching. This is how we get funded. This is how we get the funding to create these programs, to reach you and reach your neighbors and reach as many people as possible. If you really explain to folks, this is why it's important we get this information from you. Theoretically, people will be more inclined to give that information. I talked to a program manager who simply showed the EEO statement from the university, and she said that did a lot for people. Oh, it's not this person telling me I have to do it. It's university, it's government policy, and we're just following policy. So when you have a reg sheet, little piece of paper that people can check, think about that. Think of what it looks like. Do people come into your class and you say, hi, what is your ethnicity? What is your race and what is your gender? People might be put off. Maybe wait until the end of the program of your first session. Maybe work it into your introduction. There's different ways to communicate this. And I think people build trust and people build confidence. They will disclose this information at a better rate. So at that point, let's take a question. How about, let me see, am I missing one? Let me see. How about people of mixed race? And again, they can check 2 or more options. So some people are not readily open to divulge this information, especially they are undocumented and concerned about their information somehow being tracked. That's a really good question. And I agree with you. I think in the political climate we have now, people might be concerned. That's why I think it's important to have the reg sheet separate from the attendance sheet. I've seen some attendance sheets that have email, address, age, email address, and the reg information. That's just a lot of divulge information. I'm going to give you examples of 2 different kind of reg sheets. But if there's no identifying marks of the name of the person, just a blank piece of paper with the 225, 2 genders, 2 ethnicities, 5 races, that's all that's on there, people would be more than, I think, more willing to disclose it if there's no identifying marks on that piece of paper. But we're going to look at some reg sheets right now. So let's see the next slide here. So why keep it separate? I think I just covered this. If it's confidential with phone numbers, addresses, doesn't seem as confidential. And I think we really need to communicate that reg information we collect has nothing to do with the program. It doesn't matter your age, your gender, or your race when you attend a nutrition class or when you attend an after-school program. It's not relevant. We need to document it to ensure the government we're doing our job as federally funded entity, but it doesn't matter this information. We need it for another reason and has nothing to do with the topic that we're talking about today. So let's look at some more reg sheets. Okay. Okay, you can keep them separate. Can I still have a non-disclose option? I think people want to have a non-disclose option because it kind of puts people at ease, and it isn't optional. People don't have to fill this out. Although we have to report who we reach out to, the participant doesn't have to do it. So if you want to have a non-disclose option on your reg sheet, you can. And I encourage everyone to talk with program managers, talk with your faculty. But let's say you have it on there. So you have the 2, 2, 5, 2 genders, 2 races, 5 races, 2 genders, 2 ethnicities, and you want to have a do not disclose or non-disclosed. You kind of have to keep track of that. And let's say, for example, 7% of your participants elect not disclosed. Out of 500 participants, 7% equals 35 individuals that didn't disclose and are not accounted for. We talked about parity and about Asian population, white population, African American population. What if you are reaching those populations and we don't know it? Because a percentage is not disclosing. So your program might be out of parity, but you are in parity because you're reaching a group of people that don't disclose. So I think it's something to be aware of. I don't want people to think they'll get in trouble or they have to do anything, but just be aware that if you have a non-disclose, that's going to question your parity efforts and who you're reaching out to in the community. So it's kind of a tough thing. It's an optional to let people disclose the 225, but we are required to tell the government who we're reaching out to. So you see there's a little bit of a conflict there. And I have a couple questions here, so let's see if we get to this. So if we check to how does that get reported? There is a way we're going to talk about how to collect this data and so forth. But people can check more than one race, and you could kind of work that into the figures you report. So the next question, our federal ES 237 report on children served by extension does not require age, school grade, and residency. Oh, it does require. How do we put those on our sheets? So we'll talk about that in a minute. Children are different, and every program's different. I talk to program managers who they reach out to, which is public officials. Now, the public official population is going to be much different from the general census population. So it just depends on your program. This is a broad overview with census information in mind. But if you go into a school or underserved school or a low income program, that's going to kind of throw up your figures as well. So we're going to look at a couple of worksheet examples, and maybe this will give people some idea. So these are, okay, everyone gets, I guess, I can get too many questions, but other recommendations you suggest, I just recommend thoroughly explaining what I just told you to your audience every time. We're federally funded, we are required to document that we make every attempt to reach every population. We look at parity, we look at groups that are underrepresented, we look at groups that do not participate in this after school program or this nutrition program. And we try to increase those numbers by all the suggestions, networking, going to different community groups with different chambers, different advertising techniques, and then keeping the reg sheet and attendance sheets separate to let people know that the information I'm getting about your race, ethnicity, and gender has nothing to do with the program. Everyone's welcome. I need to report this, and this is why. So if someone does not want to disclose this information, please don't force them. It's optional. So if you explain the importance and the relevance and they still don't want to do it, then they don't have to do it. It's strictly optional. But again, it's a requirement on our side. And you could also let people know they could just leave it blank if they don't want to disclose anything. So with that in mind, let's look at here's an example of a reg sheet. Now, I was very impressed when I saw this one because it's there's a lot of information. There's living situation, there's the 5 races. Are you pregnant? Male, female, transgender, divorced. There's a lot of information on here. And this is for a program. This is what they need for their program. Now they're going to take, when they report it for the USDA requirement, they're just going to look at races. They're just going to look at gender. Now they're going to have separate categories to kind of keep track of. And again, I'm not telling you this is what your reg sheet should look like. This is an example of one that someone gave me a copy of. So look at this sheet as an example versus the next one. This one is just what we are required to report. And this is very clean. There's no name or identifying marks. There's no email information or home address information. This is just the sheet that we're looking for. Any questions about this so far? Let me see if I have any questions. Give me a sec. And I apologize, my computer's really slow, and here we go. Okay. Now, when I say someone can leave it blank or they don't want to fill it in, what could be a possible step? So let's look at this next slide. And there are programs for instructors that just fill in the blanks for people who leave it blank or fill it out for people, which might surprise some people. However, next slide, look at the purple paragraph. An instructor can fill in areas a participant declines to complete using information available, including who the participant came with, if they completed the reg sheet before for another class, visual clues, or any determination of their ethnicity, race, or gender. And this is taken right from a USDA SNAP Ed funded program. So there are programs that simply fill in the regs for folks. Now, it's not going to be 100% accurate. People look different, people appear different, people's perceptions are different. It's not a perfect science. I don't want people to think it is, but just an overall general view, you as an instructor could fill in the reg sheets for folks, and the government actually recommends you do that for people who don't do it. Once you teach a class and they don't disclose, you can fill in the blanks or you can fill out the reg sheets for them. So any questions about that? I'm sure that's going to get some. Here's a question. Paul, there is a misnomer that all of our programs are open to everyone. Sometimes you have a specific group, such as incarcerated youth, adults. And absolutely, if you have an incarcerated group, then absolutely. I think if the feds come in and they do an audit and they say you're really low on Asian population or Black population for this group, and then you can explain, this is our audience. And again, these recommendations are a broad overview. There are specifics for every program. And I think we can document, this program is for incarcerated youth. This is why our numbers look the way they do. And there's nothing wrong with that. So here's if we see the same people repeatedly, are we required to get this information every time? Yes, because every program is different, and I think it's safe just every class, the start of every class, give out the reg sheets, give out the poster, whether they participated or not. Okay, we may have another question. We may have demographic information for an entire population, for example, a school, and we might apply those numbers proportionately to people we provide at that education at that location. And again, Aurora, we look at all programs, it's all different. Every program has nuances. I mentioned a program that reaches elected officials. Elected officials, race, ethnicity, and gender is going to be much different from the population from the census. So we look at everything. So this is a broad overview. Most programs, it's open to everyone, and we look at census information. If not, we just simply document why. So I think if you document and keep track of this information, you're not going to get, I hate to use the word trouble, but when there's an audit, we can clearly explain. Okay, let me see if I'm missing a question. Any more questions about this? I thought this would get a lot more questions. So again, this information is good, I think, for all program people to talk with your faculty, talk with program manager, talk with your CBIs and your staff to think about who we're reaching, how we're collecting this information, because Shannon and I are going to come out, and this is the first start of a lot of training. We're going to roll programs, how to document, how to keep track of this information, what kind of spreadsheet you should use, but just think about how you teach and what's easiest for you. Okay, well, next slide. So again, how do I collect this? Pen and paper forms, kind of old school. Just think about if you teach a lot of classes, you might have a ton of paper that maybe your admin person could fill into a spreadsheet. We have Scantrons, we have teleform sheets, talk to the IT department about different ways. Some people bring laptops into their class. Some people have cell phone apps. Email this information, just think about what is the most effective way to capture this information. And I know it's work and there's no other easy way around it. But if you just work it into the way you teach and how you reach out to people, how you document people and your populations, and I think it should be okay. I'm going to go on to fingerprinting next, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them. Let's see. Here's a question. Let's see. We may have, let me see. We have a formal, sorry, Aurora, your questions like they're combined. Do we have a formal document that the way we may share with our administrators at school to show them that this information is a federal requirement and not just info we wish to collect? Okay, that's a really good question. Yes, I'd be happy to give you that information. If you look at the USDA website, I can give you the guide with all those blue quotes that we're all required to follow. I can give you the USDA guide for that. I can come up with information. If anybody could see or need information from me to give out to the community, I'd be happy to do it. I mentioned I had a program officer who simply showed the university website at the start of every class, and that was enough to make people feel at ease that this isn't Aurora's idea or this isn't Paul's idea. This isn't really the university's idea. This is actually USDA and the federal government and what they require. Here's another question. How do you want people to collect this data when you're doing information at a booth where there are no registrations, presentations, or sign-ins are required? So that's a good question, and sometimes we're required you're at, say, a county fair, and people come up to you, you can just check a box, have people self-disclose on a laptop. There's lots of ways to get this information. And you gotta think think of your audience, think of your location. Are you out in the field? Are you in a classroom? Are you doing a webinar like this one? So you got to really think about your program, how you're reaching, and what's the most effective way. So we really need to get buy-in from our audience to let them know why this is important and how we do it.
And I think, Paul, this is Shannon, if I might interject, I think Wendy's asking that she's basically has an information booth where they can learn about the Master Gardener program or something. And so if it's just really information about your program, you could consider that kind of an outreach method instead of a program. If it's like a significant educational exchange or something where you're really working with them and answering really in-depth questions, then you could do what Paul mentioned. But if you're just kind of at the fair and there's information about 4-H or Master Gardeners there, we wouldn't expect you to collect demographics on folks where you're just informing them about the program offerings.
Thank you, Shannon. Any more questions before we go on to fingerprinting? As mentioned, I'm always available. You can reach out to me. I will give you my information at the end of this presentation. Shoot me an email, give me a call, and I would love to hear some of the challenges you have out there, and we'll come up with a way to get this information. Okay. So fingerprinting, this is something, there's an NRS that we have to fingerprint folks and do a background check on all extension employees, as well as volunteers who work directly with children. So letter of appointments, temp hires, interns, if they work with children, they need to be fingerprinted for obvious reasons. So the results can take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. So think about that. If you have an intern that's here for a month, just be aware of the time constraints in that situation. So I wish there was a faster way to do it, and there's really not. If you see this slide as well, all fingerprints come to my office. I send them to the police department. The police department sends them to the Department of Public Safety. And when we get the results, it's the same process backwards. The Department of Public Safety goes to the UNR Police Department, who then gives the information to my office. So I know it's a lengthy process. You have to be patient. Let people know the process, how long it takes. Get people fingerprinted as soon as possible when you know you need the results. So there are 2 ways to submit fingerprints. Ink on paper card, must be clear with no smudges. Make sure the card is complete, no missing signatures or dates or social security numbers, all that information. Please keep it secure, but it must be complete, because fingerprint processing takes long as it is. And then when there's a mistake, I got to send it back, and that delays it. Or people could be finger scanned here in the Las Vegas office or at the police department on campus. I have a question. Continue to collect contact numbers as you, let's see. Continue to collect contact numbers as you have been for federal reporting. That's from Shannon. So a fingerprint packet must be completed. Hold on, folks, another question. Okay. A fingerprint packet must be completed for every single person fingerprinted. And that includes, it's 7 pages. You fill out completely, no missing pages or missing signatures. You got to check the volunteer or the employee's picture, government issued identification, and then everything gets sent to my office. That way I could look at it, check for errors, document it, we put it on a spreadsheet, we document when we received it and when we send it to the police department. So if you have someone finger scan, please let me know. There are times you get results and we'll know who the people are. So make sure the fingerprint packet gets sent to me, and then you can send it to the police department, or if you send it, the police will need the packet as well before they do it. But just send me an email. Hey, I sent this person to be fingerprinted, so we can just keep track. There's a lot of folks being fingerprinted, and it's a job to kind of keep track of everything. But if you keep me informed, then we'll be good. So here's my information, my email, my direct phone number. This is the location where you send fingerprints and fingerprint packets. Volunteer packets are separate from fingerprint packets. Volunteer packets get kept with the county office, but the fingerprint packet comes to my office. So we'll separate them that way. Any questions about fingerprinting? I know this doesn't affect everyone, but a lot of people who work with volunteers and folks who hire people, please come see me with any questions you have about fingerprinting. It's very important that we do this. And let's see any more questions. We have a question here. Thank you for your participation in the webinar. Please take a moment to fill out the survey. And I got a thank you from Juan Carlos. You're welcome. And again, I'm always here for this kind of stuff. I know it's complicated. I hope I didn't go too fast. It's a tricky thing to talk about, and it's a lot of information, and there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice this information. So I'm more than happy to hear any challenges or any suggestions or advice you have. Maybe you have a great way to get reg information that works really well for you. Give it to me and we'll share it. I mean, let's all work together and get this information.
So just another reminder that we will post the webinar and slides and any supplemental materials, for example, what Paul had mentioned he would prepare for Aurora, on our employee resources site after we're done with all of our webinar series. You can anticipate that probably early March. You need to go through and make sure everything is accessible. In addition to that, if you have any other questions after you've digested this information, feel free to send them to Paul and PCC myself. as we will be continuing to put together FAQs or other training on questions and topics that you all identify as a need. So with that in mind, please take a minute to complete our survey. It'll ask both information about this webinar and also additional training topics that we can offer you to better support you in meeting these civil rights requirements. So the link is in our chat pod. Thank you again, everyone. And thank you, Paul, for your presentation. We appreciate all the information that you've gathered and shared with us.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Shannon.